housekeeping before we roll into today's announcement. There will be a full transcript available of today's press conference. It will be available shortly after the conclusion, so please be on the lookout for that. Just last week at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, IndyCar announced it will open the door for increased technical innovation in its cars and continue its long-standing effort to improve safety in open-wheel racing. Right now, I'd like to introduce Derek Walker, President of Competition and Operations for IndyCar, to discuss our long-term competition strategy and timeline.
Thank you, Amy. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, as is no secret, I've now joined IndyCar. I've crossed over to the dark side, as I like to say. And I took this job because I wanted to, and it was offered to me, and it represented a huge challenge, a huge opportunity for me. So I'm more than happy to be here. So we're here to talk about one of the many favorite topics of conversation over the last year or so, the infamous aero kits. When we started thinking about aero kits, well, when I came on board and got with Will Phillips, who's to my left here, who you probably all know, we started hunkering down on, how do we go forward, because we had a lot of inputs. We worked a lot with all the manufacturers and talked to the teams, Firestone, Dallara. Will had done a considerable amount before I joined on, so it was coming in and just laying it all out on the table and saying, well, what does it mean? How do we do it? What's the best thing for the series? And of course, as has been said, and some of you may say today, that, why screw with aero kits? Everything's great. We're racing, why do? So hopefully when you see where we ended up, you get an idea of why we are doing what we're going to do, which is obviously introduce some modifications to the car over time. So when we started looking at it and say, okay, how's the best to do it? We kept getting drawn into the concept of where is it going to go? It's easy to pass a rule and say, okay, it's aero kits next year, knock yourself out. But what does it really mean? Where is it going to go? And given that we've got such a good foundation in the car and the competition right now, you have to look at it and say, well, we need to think about this carefully. And the more and more we thought about it, the more we had to look out long term. So we went as far out as we could imagine. And so far out was, well, what's the lifespan of this car realistically? The main components, what's the lifespan? Or what could we do that would maintain stability of that package? Also, we had to look at the manufacturer's participation, what they were looking for. We listened to the fans, because the fans are a big component of this, and the fans, whether you get it or not, but we do, they want some kind of change. They like what they've got, but they're still crying out for some other things. A lot of people, the good old days, bring it back, and innovation and all those things. So we had a series of objectives, and we looked out as long term as we can. So when you see this chart that we're going to show you, it covers a lot of different aspects of that puzzle. And what we're trying to do is introduce change, and I'll come back to why we need to introduce change. We need to do it in a fiscally responsible way, because change costs money, as we all know. And we had to do it in a way that we listen to the people who are going to probably spend the most money on this thing, the manufacturers. We have two manufacturers showed high interest in doing aero kits and a deeper participation in IndyCar. So we had to listen to them. Didn't have to, we wanted to listen to them because they were a big part of this component. So when we looked at it, we developed this chart, and I'm going to walk you through with it, and I'm sure you'll have lots of questions, or we may have lots of questions. Just if I can ask you to hold that to the end, and then we'll come back to your questions when we're done. So, Will, if you could pull out. So here's the chart. I'll start at the top and work down, just because it's a point of reference. If you look at the top row of numbers, which is the official track record number, so in 2012, 2:26 at Indy was the pole position time. And as you go through, you can see increases in speed. Some of those have already been done, and some of them potentially could be targets, depending on how we can reconfigure our car. And depending on which side of the equation you sit, it's our belief that speed does count. Speed is a differential that IndyCar has. They are the fastest cars in the world in the closed circuit competition if we want them to be, and they have been, and they still have some considerable records. So when you look at that qualifying speed, you're looking at Indianapolis only. You're taking a snapshot of Indianapolis, and you're saying, if speed's a component, what are we doing? What's the effect? So these are just calculations. Don't get hung up on the numbers. But as you step through it, we introduced the current car in 2012, as you know. We're halfway through 2013. Now here's where we really started to look at it very carefully and say, what do we need to do? And what we need to do, and what we're going to do, is we needed to look first safety. If we're going to ramp up the speed, or if we do ramp up the speed, because as we make these changes and as the team get more familiar with the car, and as the engine manufacturers continue to invest lots of money in our series and develop their engines, we're going to go quicker. So we have to say, well, what's out there that we need to really think about? So safety came up on the radar, and one component of this car is the capability of lift. It has a huge flat bottom, and we know it just needs that perfect storm to create lift with these cars. So we said, we've got to address lift. We're going to look at that aspect. Open wheel cars in general, even NASCAR, all suffered for and all had to deal with that. In the good old days, when I started racing, they didn't have flat bottoms like they have now, so it was never an issue. You'd probably roll over before you take off. But nowadays, the component of downforce and the larger area underneath the car, we've got a lift component, so we need to deal with that. So we said, well, wait a minute, if we're going to do these aero kits and then we go change the bottom, then what sense does that make? The manufacturers are going to waste all their time and money, and we haven't addressed the safety issue first. So we said, safety is number one. We need to get that floor situation under control. So we said, let's look at it from multiple angles. How do we do it? Do we reduce it? Do we put trapdoors in it? So we haven't got the answer here today, but all I can tell you is we're going to spend, we mean in IndyCar, we're going to spend a bit of money researching a floor as soon as we can that reduces the lift potential of this car. Because if we're going to have a speed component, you're going to increase the lift, 4 times every mile an hour, whatever the calculation is. And Will tell you that, but he's got all the numbers. So we're going to start a development program. We're going to get with Dallara and our manufacturers, engine manufacturers, and aerodynamists, and everybody else in our advisory committee. We've got a lot of people that have got a lot of ideas. So we're going to start working on a revised floor, and that's going to be ideally, hopefully, done this year in time for the manufacturers to build into their aero kit. So when you take to 2014, there's no changes in aero kits there. But there is a change in engine homologation, which was already planned. So the engines are going to be modified. They're going to be going quicker. And we're going to, as it says on my little box there, is we're going to reduction in race downforce. And what that means is, as we look at the racing, how it goes, we're going to have to continue to do, not just start, but continue to modify that balance of amount of downforce for the avoidance of wide open racing. And also, when you look at that component, we're talking super speedways here, but there is another component about street races. So what we need on a street race isn't necessarily what we need at super speedways. But we're just putting it in that box. That's part of our adjustments that we're going to be making with the minimal cost to the teams. We're not trying to keep moving the goalposts, but don't be anybody surprised if Will isn't doing some juggling with the downforce to improve the show. So then you get into 2015. In 2015, providing our manufacturers still are motivated to stay in our series, and I'll come back to that point in a minute, we're going to introduce these aero configurations. You can call them a kit, you can call them whatever you like, but they're aero changes in the car. So and that change is going to be across road courses and ovals. So it's 100%. You're going to have hopefully a Honda version and a Chevrolet version. And if there's some other component, another manufacturer comes along and it all fits and can be done in an organized, managed way, the door's open for others. But we've got to manage it. So aero kits in 2015. So you'll see a significant jump in speed at Indianapolis. And the rules for that are currently being scripted. We have them pretty well 80% done until we finalize this outline. Now we're going to go back and put the rest. So the manufacturers, within a couple of weeks or so, will have the written rules as to how they can compete and what they can and can't do. So then that takes you out to 2016. 2016 just happens to be, of course, as you all well know, the 100th running of the Indianapolis 500. So an important time and a ceremonial event. So when you look at the speed increases and the improvements in the car, you can realistically expect that we will possibly break that record. Unless we make major changes to backtrack, we're probably going to crack the record. It's not a must-do. It'd be a nice do, but it's not a must-do. But when you look at these changes in the car configuration and the other components that make this race car work, it's logical to think we're going to get a rise in speeds. So in that, as the car develops, we're working with our partner Firestone to continue to develop the best tire for our kind of cars, and I think everybody would have to agree today we've had super support from them. We've had a lot of great racing, safe racing, and they know how to build a car for 240, 250 miles an hour if you can go that fast. So the capacity's there, but when they see this plan, they got something to work to. We're not sitting there saying maybe. We're going to do this, and so a big part of that is working with our Firestone colleagues to improve the tire development and adapt the tire to what the car needs to be. In addition, engine power increase. What we say there, as we've done before, for qualifying in the qualifying situation in Indy or anywhere else for that matter, we have the ability to turn up the boost to give more power if that is needed. So it's just saying that there's a potential there. It's not saying a must do, because at the end of the day, the longer we turn up the boost, the more the engine needs to be rebuilt and the more it costs teams. So it's a fine balance between going crazy and going fast, and then, by the way, your engine bill is already expensive, it'll be even more expensive. So then you take you out to 17. You can see aero upgrades. It's not like we're suddenly changing the thing all the time. The process of racing and IndyCar racing, like all racing series, is a continual change. Nothing ever stays forever in racing, and nor should it. So we can realistically expect there could be some upgrades in the future in 2017 to continue to grow, because we'll learn what our aero kit does and how better to optimize it. So you can expect some changes there. And again, working with our partners, not decisions made in a vacuum. We'll be working with our partners. An engine upgrade, and again, the cycle of homologation. There's probably a chance that the engine manufacturers can make a bigger change in their engine configuration in 2017. And here's a new one, team development. We're going to start opening up areas of the car. Teams want it, fans want it, and we're going to try and get back, to a little bit more of a variation in our competition. So, in a controlled way, because all the teams want to see us, monitor the show and make sure there's no, cheating going on or no bending of the rules. So we have to, when we open up open areas, we're losing a lot of control, and in a sense, because we're allowing the teams to do non-Delara parts or modified Delara parts. So we need to do that in a way that we can manage and keep the competition fair for everybody. So team development 2017. You'll see the speeds drop down after 2016. I think that's just a speculation, and it's also a possibility if it's required. I'm not sure that we as IndyCar need to be doing the sound barrier all the time every year. We don't need to break that barrier every time, but I think you will see changes in specification of the car that will influence speed. But the quest to be quick is certainly an objective. And then taking it out to 2018, a very important year, 2018, because the current car, if you look at with aero kits, 2018 is probably the end of its current form in competition. Or could be. We're saying it probably is, or is rather, not probably. And the reason we say that is if you look at the current platform and the pieces that we've got, and even with the aero kits thrown in there, the basic package has been on the shelf for quite a long time at that point. And there'll be a lot of other ideas coming along, safety ideas, driver cells, all kinds of things that come along that will say we need to do some bigger changes. So in 2018, you're probably looking at the end of an era of this current car. So then we're really faced with the situation, if we were so lucky, going into 2019 by saying, you know, do we go with another new car, get the latest technologies, the latest thing, or do we find another way? We're proposing, and we think that's probably what's going to happen because of the economic environment that we're in. We're probably going to extend the life of that car, try to another 3 or so years. And how we're going to do that is take the basic spine, chassis, the gearbox, and other key components of the chassis, the rolling chassis, and say, let's not do a kit, let's do a complete facelift, so a complete body styling, which would give you several things. It would build in some more safety, it would build your car for the future to extend that car's life. It would help the teams by not obsoleting everything. And we're working to hopefully better times, more fans, more sponsors coming in, and ultimately being able to afford to look at other variations. But for the time being, we're looking at a lean, mean economy out there, so we're going to try and keep some longevity in our parts. But a complete body kit would give you a different look, a different performance, and it should be, and we'll find out if we can, but it should be about the car of the future. It should be a car, and you've probably heard that word before, but it should be a car that looks like a modern racing car. And when you look at it, you should say, that's an Indy car. You shouldn't be any doubt, it's an Indy car. So we can build a complete body, wing package, underfloor, everything. It can look like a completely different car. Whether we run into some safety issues along the way that says, gee, the chassis needs to be different, we need to do a chassis, we'll have to reverse that. But that process to do 2019 is not going to start it's going to be coming around the corner here soon. So we're going to work over a few years to this point and start with some basic concepts and then start applying ourselves. Again, not in a vacuum, including as many components of our community as we can. So in 2019, we're saying it has to be a major improvement in the car, a different styling, a different performance. And then we come to, well, of course, and the safety improvements that I put in my list there. The other one is the engine formula. We will have run this formula right through to 2019. There's nothing says we can't look at other engine formulas along the way, but obviously we haven't said that in this chart. We've not intimated that. So any new formula change in the engines, we're going to get with our current partners and Chevrolet and Honda and say, look, hey, we've got potential to do this. What do you feel about it? Because we don't want to alienate anybody. But certainly 2019, I think it's far enough out to say we will look at other technologies or other engine sizes or other whatever. What we're saying here is obviously we want to build a car that's not only fast, not only Indy car, but we want to build a car that's green. It's got a green element to it, or it's got a variation in the formula that adds more variety, brings more people into sport, enhances the competition. So we're putting that out there, and why it's very useful to have that is a statement of where we're going to go. Is as we talk to other manufacturers and other interested parties, we can say, look, here's our plan. If you want to come in with your technology and different technologies what we're running, 2019, or we can go back to our current partners, if we can introduce it sensibly sooner, I don't think it's likely, then we can do that. But I can't emphasize all of these sort of changes up until 19 are all a combination of working together. It's not us making decisions in a vacuum. And then 19 through to 21, we've just plotted those years out because I think these old dogs by 2021 will definitely be old dogs and we will be changing them. So, that's just saying for the economic sake, how do we make this thing last longer? How do we, save money for the teams and build in some longevity? So that's our plan. We've got one more chart here to show you, and then I'll take questions. On the right-hand top corner, or my left hand, you've got the speedway configuration. So all the components in red are components that the manufacturers, currently 2 engine manufacturers, can make their own body panels, their own styling, to individualize that car and compete in 2015. There is a note, as you can see the arrows to the wings. If we don't make any changes, currently right now, these wings that we run at the super speedways are getting some weird angles to achieve the lap times we want. We'd probably, if we didn't change anything else, we'd probably come back and change the wings and make them operate in the traditional way they work and get the balance better for the teams. But if we're changing the floor, there's a good chance that wing configuration might be something different than we're looking at. It may even be the same wings as we're running, the main planes. So we're not saying that these components are automatic. Once we've got some floor data and have a better idea, we'll be telling the manufacturers whether they are a component or not a component of the aero kit. We're trying to keep as many things consistent and not just change for change's sake. Then you go to the bottom right corner, and that is the road course configuration. So you can take everything you've got there up on the left, with the exception of the wing main plane. You can take all these body panels, and you can fit them on your road course car and knock yourself out. And you can add these additional parts which you will need for road courses for more downforce for a different application. So that, in simplistic terms, is the plan. There's a lot of work to go with that. Will's already started on a lot of the writing of this thing, and we'll be closing out as soon as we can, and then we'll be looking for the manufacturers to tell us where they are. If one manufacturer of our current group decides that it's not what they want to do and doesn't want to participate, or if the majority of the team says we don't want it, forget it, we're not coming, we're just not doing it, then either of those situations would say, forget it, take it off the table. So we're not, it is a rule, we're going forward with it, it is going to happen, but it's with consent of our partners, because without them buying into it, what do we do? We're just dreaming up rules that don't go anywhere. So once we get the manufacturers committing to it, we'll announce who's on board, what we're doing, or if there's no air kit, then we'll go back and think about it from a different perspective. Or if the teams overnight somewhere get a hot button and say, boy, this is crazy, let's do away with it, then we'll obviously address it and say, okay, let's go and try something else. Let's look at it from a different way and how can we do it a different way. So anyway, a bit of a rush through, a lot of words. I'll take questions if anybody.
Yes, we do have wireless microphones, so we ask you please wait till you have that. Also, we will have a copy of the press release and those graphics, including the timeline for you upon completion of today's availability. We'll take our first question from Marshall Pruitt.
Derek, we've announced aero kits, I think it's our third time now, and we've had the owners decide, basically reject the concept on the financial grounds. You just mentioned that if there's a consensus, we might not go forward. How much building of relationships have you done in your short time already to get a feel for whether we're going to have a third rejection?
Well, believe it or not, up until yesterday, the manufacturers didn't know anything about what we were going to propose, and we did a meeting yesterday, and they were the first partners with IndyCar that actually had a chance to see this. Up until then, it was Will and I and Mark standing at the back of the room, but the only people who knew what IndyCar was going to do. So we presented to them. There was a few more boards which actually addressed costs from their standpoint in our presentation, which we didn't think it was right to bring them out here because it's not relevant to this meeting. And we met with the drivers, gave them the same sort of presentation. And we met with the manufacturers, did that with them. And we're here with you today. So we tried to get to everybody as soon as we could because we wanted that feedback. And so far, there are suggestions on how we should think about this or should think about that, but I haven't had anybody come up and say no way. In fact, I've only seen one owner and wanted to go out there and get his name in the paper and say it was maybe other ways should be better, which is his right. But in that meeting, it was very constructive, and I think we got general support, at least right now.
Hey Derek, I have two questions. One is, once they introduce the changes in red, how often can they change those pieces, or is it locked in once they introduce them? And the second part is, will there be price caps on it, as how much they can charge the teams for these kits?
Good questions. There will, once you've made them, you own them, right? They're yours. The league always looks at the competition and looks for inequalities in the rules. course, there's no guarantee every manufacturer, every team, or every engine or whatever is going to come out and be even, Steven. And some of it is very challenging from the league perspective, to be able to manage that, you know, get that balance, because there's nobody wants to see half the teams be totally disfranchised because they happen to have an aero calculation that, quite frankly, can go wrong. So we're always going to be looking to try and help make the field be as satisfactory as it can. So if that situation will arise, you can guarantee we'd step in and in a managed way would try to be offering some help to allow that manufacturer to make some additional changes to try and rectify if he's got a big problem. But you know, that's not going to be day one. We're going to take a long hard look at it, because we know how you can play those games, so we're not going to be sucked into that by changing the rules every time somebody says it doesn't work. The second part, I guess my answer would be, I hope so. We are going to put forward a group of recommendations to the manufacturers of what we want to do, and we do want to put caps on it, realistic caps. You know, when we look at the car components, the manufacturers is making small quantities. It's going to make quality pieces, small quantity. So he's not in there to sell a bunch of these and make a lot of money. He's in there to get the best products of his thing. So he can't afford to probably give that away. He probably doesn't want to, because he's already spent a lot of money on developing the stuff. So there's a balance there that we've got to reach, and we will be meeting with the manufacturers and giving our final rules package, which will specify what costs and what won't cost. So the last thing we want to do is just increase the inflation to the teams. So we definitely do have to try to manage that, and we want our partners to understand that and help us with it. Long answer.
This is a question for both of you. At the moment, how are you proposing that the lap speed is generated to get a record lap at Indy, while you're also trying to take away downforce? Because at the moment, you know, I mean, they're virtually flat out all the way around, especially in qualifying, which is what you're trying to prevent by stripping the taking the downforce off, making the car, you know, where driver talent is, you know, plays a greater part. But you're also trying to get lap speeds. I mean, how much are you envisioning the engine manufacturers can increase horsepower by to make these cars more of a beast?
It's going to be a combination of buyer development, Firestone, manufacturer development, and it has to be a combination of tyres, downforce, and horsepower. Not one of them will work effectively on its own. So it's working with the chassis manufacturer, Dallara, it's working with Firestone, it's working with Chevrolet and Honda right now to make sure that we bring that together as a package. You get one of them wrong and it can upset the whole apple cart.
But also I'd add to that, David, just because we bring in aero kits doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go slower. I'm not saying you're suggesting that, but the killer is the drag. When you make those aero kits, you're going to potentially lose a lot of drag. So the drag is like a pill, just like the engine power is. You know, it's a go faster pill.
Robin Miller.
Derek, when this new car first came along, the big story was, well, maybe they'll also regenerate the cottage engine soon in Indianapolis, and maybe these guys. Will any of this super speedway kit or the aero configuration for road courses, will it be available for cottage guys to build rear wings and side pods and stuff for this speed? Will it still be a closed shop? That's number one. Number two, when you get to 2016 or 17, whatever, would you encourage open competition from a chassis manufacturer, or would you still like to keep it pretty much a spec, just have one chassis?
Well, I think to the cottage engine question, I think we'd all like to see that come back. I think when the team development areas open up, and we've yet to totally define what those are. I mean, we can think of them and have a short list, but we've got to knuckle down and actually do the due diligence. So that will produce some capability to be farmed out locally. But if you look at where we currently are, you know, the current car as is and our supplier, we have a partnership with Dallara, and you know, we need them to get through to a period in time, which in this case is going to be 2017, before we start opening it up in a careful way. So the cottage industry issue will be addressed as we gradually open up. But you know, everybody thinks that's a panacea to everything good, and when you open it up. But in reality, you know, our partner with Dallara and the stability, everybody says, oh, it's great racing, and it is. It's very competitive, very close. Well, actually, just remember the Dallara component in there has really helped to create some of that very close racing. So there's some good to that. We've just got to manage it over time. And to the other point, I think we'd all love to have more competition from different chassis manufacturers. And so again, long term, and when the windows open up for that consideration, we wouldn't turn anybody down. We'd obviously look at it and see if it's viable and the best thing for in the interests of IndyCar. And if it was, we would. But that's a bit further out. Right now, we're partnered with Dallara, and that's where it's going to be for the next few years.
Derek, with your experience from ALMS, you know how the green racing side of that really did bring in fans, and you know the innovations of like the Delta Wing really brought in fans. And the fact that you're running E85, which is a good green fuel, and the engine design is the direct injection turbo is where the manufacturers are going. Could you sort of pull back from the technical side and talk about how you think all of this package will maybe pull in more fans and really repopulate the stands in IndyCar?
Well, I think from a big picture view, racing is it's hard to see racing sometimes as a development platform for green. We've used a lot of resources to do what we do. The one thing about racing is it does help you develop those products quicker. It's a fast track to develop those products or fluids or whatever. So I think we need to be on that page a lot more than we are. So we're not so clear on what that needs to be, but it needs to be a component in the future. So again, we build it in over time because it's going to take time to do that. But we have to be going that route. So and whether the fans are attached to that or not, I would have to think they think it's good. We're responsible for what we do. But really the fans, we need to wake them up in more different ways than just green, although green's a good thing. But we need to let them know there's some good stuff going over here, and we need to find a way to reignite and get them back around, because without them, we're just doing a technical exercise here.
Derek, how much room is there really to move within these parameters? Are they really going to look that much different? Is there much variation involved in terms of the appearance?
They will look different to start with, but monkey see, monkey do. Whoever's got the best package, they're going to migrate that way, or because of the restrictions we've got in the rules and how many panels, it may lead them all to a similar place. It may. But they're going to spend a lot of time trying to be different and trying to be better. So we may get some surprises there. I think we will for the introduction of these aero kits. But when you look at what we have to do and how we do it, this is one of the easier ones in terms of beginning the process to change our cars and our specifications. So I think it's one of the more cost-effective ways to do it.
Isn't there an opportunity here with all this to take particularly the Indy 500 back to its roots, the tradition of innovation and differentiation? You seem to have an opportunity here to, do a Delta Wing plus on a broad basis, at least for the 500.
It's certainly a valid question and a position to take. I don't think we in IndyCar can really afford to do that, and I don't mean just in a money sense, but in terms of it would take several years to build that back up where it became a show, became an event, and you would see a heck of a lot less people up there winning the races. You see the big budget teams, the big players, would be the winners because they have the resources, they always do. So it's a balance between what do you want, close racing, or do you want, you know, a difference, disparity across the field. I think what we've got is pretty good. We need to continue to, you know, be ahead of that curve and trying to further enhance it, but I don't think we can realistically jump that far back, and I don't see it being the right thing for IndyCar at the moment. I'd love to be able to try that, and if it didn't work, come back to where we are, but they won't let me do that.
Marshall.
Derek, my estimation is that the technical interest from the average fan about IndyCar today is probably as low as it's ever been. With everything proposed here, I love the ideas and sound of it, but I think most of these things are things that excite the folks that already care. It doesn't add anybody to the party. It's maybe a little bit outside of the competition department, but what elements of promoting these things, of letting people know that new technical innovations are coming, changes are coming, to excite folks, because ultimately that's what this is for.
Well, we didn't get here overnight. We evolved here. So where we go from here will also be a process of devolution. And if we're going to go to a completely different place ultimately, it will take time to do that. I don't care who comes in and takes this job and has the challenge of moving the sport in one way or the other. It's going to take a lot of time, and it always comes down to resources and time. So that's one point. The other one is that when you look at the aero kit, which I almost hate the word aero kit because it has an impression of being some sort of body bit you put on there and you've got a different car, but it's really the same. This will be major design changes, and I've always said they're deal changes. This is a deal changer. There's a lot of things this is going to affect by going away from the traditional running car. But if you look at the aero kit, if you want to call it that, branding is a big component. So when you look at promoting, I'm sure Chevrolet, I'm sure Honda, because now they're going to have their own image, their own car design, albeit under the spine of the running chassis that we've got. But they're going to have, so there's a promotion element, and they're going to promote that. Why else would they do it? They're not in it to learn about how to make Indy cars go better. They're in it to promote. There's also a speed element. It will certainly change the game when it comes to speed. It'll also affect the road courses, which we don't need, a huge increase in speed. We need a different kind of racing, so we get more overtaking in a car that is, on the limit to drive, and the best do it, and the guys who are learning take a little bit longer. And we've got cars that are fairly easy. We've got a power range which is fairly low, so the balance of grip and power is maybe not where we want to be. So these aero kits will allow some of those things to be addressed over time. And the last thing is the fans want to see some differentiation. So as much as I would like to turn the clock back to running offies or whatever the favorite is of the month, I'm not so sure that Back to the Future is that's the best way to do that. And I think we need to keep stability, keep rubbing on it. So this is a very conservative step for sure. This is not earth-shattering, but there is some newness in this. This is going to look a little different. It's going to introduce an aero race within the two manufacturers, which they want, and it's going to give some differentiation for the teams and their cars, and the fans hopefully will recognize that. But it's not the magic bullet that's going to fix IndyCar, and I just don't think you can see that realistically happen in that sort of time. You've got to think a little bit further out. Now, if you want to get kind of adventurous around 2019, 2021, yeah, possibly. But we've got a plan here. We're moving in that direction, and we're going to be working on what's the next step, and all part of an evolution, I think.
We'll go with Mark Scaloni.
A question for Will. Was any consideration given to allowing the teams for the manufacturers to relocate the radiators, because that somewhat controls the shape or the ability to try different things with the side pods adjacent to the drivers? Would they be allowed to move the radiators forward, backwards, or do anything?
There was some consideration over that. It is there are competitive reasons why they shouldn't change right now, but it's one of the things that we have been in discussions with the manufacturers as to does that or doesn't it overly dictate any potential opportunities that exist to make it look different.
But Mark, if I can just finish that one off, it would be a considerable advantage if we said radiators are free or ducts free or whatever. You open up, you know, change costs money to the teams. It's going to mean new components they've already got. And also, if you did away with the duct, you're actually doing away with a large component, which is a safety item stuck out there. So it'd be nice to remove that duct and let the manufacturers go. But there's no guarantee as the side pod design ends up how much driver protection you may be taking away. And for us to have to go back and re-look at every manufacturer's kit and think about the crash structure there and how it performs. We thought that for cost reasons and for those reasons, we'd leave those. There may be something in the future, but not right now.
We're going to wrap things up going David, Joe, and then Robin.
Hi. Right, I wanted to just confirm basically that the team owners, like even the ones that aren't, you know, in the big league, that they have said that this way, you know, this is a gradual enough process for them to be able to afford it. Because, I mean, when Mark Miles took charge, basically he said, yeah, we do need technical innovation, but we don't want to blow up views by, you know, imposing too much on these guys. I mean, just to confirm that, like, even the guys that won yesterday, they are actually okay with this step-by-step process, and they feel that they can afford it.
Yeah, I mean, no team likes to spend money, but what we're doing is we're spreading out over time to give them time to work into it, and we're doing the least impact on their budget we can do. The change is going to cost money, but also if we're not going to change, then we can save a lot of money. But I guess the question comes is, do we need to change? And in my opinion, we do. And if you look at the current car, nobody wanted to buy that, or at least at the time most of them said they didn't. They hunkered down, did a heck of a job, and they made it happen. And it was a tough pill to swallow for all of the cost of reinvesting in a car. And now here we are, we're at a better place, and we're looking a bit further out. So where do we go from here? We're not throwing the whole car away. We've got our engine partners who are willing to carry the brunt of the development there and spend a lot of money making these components. And the team owners are going to pay their share. If we don't feel we need to develop IndyCar in this direction, then obviously we don't need to be doing this. The league happens to think we do. We've gone to great lengths to explain to our team owners and our manufacturers and with you today why we think that's necessary, and we're going to move forward with that plan. There's always, if the team owners disagree with it and there's not a majority there that really keeps it going, we'll drop it. I mean, we're not all enough to just ram it down the throat, because we need everybody in the game. We need everybody to buy into this and make it happen.
Joe?
Building on that, Derek, you mentioned the need for the manufacturers and team owners to buy into that. What is the time frame for them buying into it before you have to move forward with this plan?
Well, I see Mark came from Chevrolets over there. I'm going to say Monday, of course. So, no, we need to give them time to digest the rules. So if you look at the timeline, we're trying to, the Will's going to cringe when I say this, we're going to try and get these things finalized in at least 2 to 3 weeks. So the manufacturer will have something ASAP. And then realistically, you know, we're going to ask them, basically. We want it ASAP, but if they have a process internally they have to go through and consider these things, obviously we're going to say, what's your timeline for making a decision? And we'll try to get them both on the same page so we can release it and get on with it. Because obviously as the clock ticks, you know, we're going to be developing this underbody regardless of whether the manufacturer is going to do these kits or not. We'll be doing that. So the process hasn't waiting on them to do it. We have to do something on the floor area and reduce that. And there's other things incidentally on the safety aspect. We mentioned before, but we're going to do a lot more of safety period. And that's not just the driver. it's the pit crews, it's the fans and stands. You probably all know that Indianapolis, Indianapolis Motor Speedway is working on a current plan to make significant changes at that place, not just for safety, but safety included. So there's a big initiative on trying to be, fiscally responsible with not only how we spend our money, but how do we add protection as we try to ramp up and try to be, the series we want to be.
We'll take our last question from Robin Miller.
Derek, you had a team in karting, 4-engine manufacturers, 4 chassis manufacturers, 2 tire manufacturers. What about Audi and Dodge, Ford? Have they indicated to you or Will that there's an engine that they would be interested in 2 or 3 years that you might take a different route and go that way?
Well, I know the league a year or two ago, a year and a half ago, went out looking and knocking on doors to see who was interested. At that time, they weren't. Hopefully, with a bit more of a long-range plan, and the door is open for consideration for other engine configurations. Not immediately, but if any manufacturer said, "Gee, I like this idea, let's go do it," they're going to have a 2 to 3 year build-up plan. So, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. But IndyCar, the door's open for competition here. We're not. We're grateful with the current manufacturers because they provided great competition between them and great engines. They fit